Hello, and welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. On today's episode, we will be talking with our friend Matthew Gregory. Matt is the founder and leader of a local group called SPOCK, where we get together and discuss topics such as aliens, UAPs, fringe theories, and consciousness. It's something Jonathan and I have been attending over the past year, and we've enjoyed being a part of the group, attending the SPOC meetings, and meeting people who are like-minded to us. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Matt about his vast knowledge about aliens, UAPs. We're going to talk about what his theories are and also touch on things related to what's happening with governmental disclosure currently. So it was a lot of fun. We had a great time having this conversation, and we hope you enjoy. Hey, Matt, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, the first thing I personally want to know is I want to know the origins of your interest in aliens, UAPs, consciousness. Where did that all start for you?
Started really in the mid 70s with Leonard Nimoy because Star Trek was in syndication, so it like would come on 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then also in syndication on the weekends was In Search of, which also had Leonard Nimoy, and that was kind of like a modern ah, X-Files kind
Mm-hmm.
of investigative journalism thing. That was scary for someone my age. I guess I was what, 8 or 9, and but at the same time intriguing. So that's kind of what got me started. So between both of those shows, both with starring Leonard Nimoy, that's how I kind of got into it. Consciousness comes later. You
Hmm.
know, in the 70s, UFOs and space and aliens. I had no idea what quantum physics was or how it related to CERN, of that. That took a while, but it got there eventually.
It's funny. That show In Search of, there's a whole bunch of like YouTube like clips and like episodes, and it's something I used to fall asleep to because I just thought his voice was so soothing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do
And some of
enjoy
the
that
music was
show.
to be scary. You know, that 70s synthesizer kind
Yeah,
of sound effects and stuff could be a little bit scary too.
yeah. So have you had any what you would like describe as strange experiences with anything with what, the phenomenon, aliens, ghosts, or anything like that?
So when I've done personal CE5 adventures, I think I've seen things, but I can't validate it because I'm very analytical. So much so that, people think that I'm wearing an aluminum foil hat and send me things, and I'm like, no, it's this. No, and like people get very disappointed or upset because they see things and it's emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I question myself to that extent too. There was one time though, and this is not a UAP. I think it was a ghost. My friends and I in high school were riding around this area of Glenver called Waubun. If you know where that is, it's kind of near Dixie Caverns.
Okay.
And we saw like the creepiest, just at this little church on this little windy road, and just the creepiest kind of odd, old looking preacher that kind of was standing in the middle of the road. And just, I guess you kind of had to be there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was just, you had that feeling, that just kind of sweeps through you.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just confused and went around there. And then I was unsettled, but one of us convinced the other two it was okay to go back, and it was just gone. There was nobody there. Um, but that's actually probably the most strangest thing that I've ever encountered.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a lot of luck with seeing ghosts and things like that. I'm very jealous of those who have actually.
It's one of those things that like super creepy when in the moment when it's happening to you. and you look back and it
Yeah.
kind of makes you question yourself. But at the moment, you kind of have to like, well, I mean, it probably was something. And just for like zooming out for context for people who aren't in kind of the Roanoke, Virginia, Salem, Virginia area, this part of the state of Virginia, we're basically at the gateway to Southwest Virginia. So what he's talking about is kind of a more going out towards the more rural, kind of like getting in towards where you, the way you would go to get towards more the Southwest Virginia part of the state. Kind of like the Glenver is more like that in my opinion at least. What just to circle back to kind of how you started that sentence for people who might not know what this is, what is CE5? So you said CT5?
That is a protocol that was invented by Dr. Stephen Greer. He is was an I guess he's always a doctor. He
Yeah.
was formerly an official emergency room doctor that started investigating UAPs, UFOs, and that kind of stuff, and invented this protocol to basically call them in, if you will. Um, and you can download. He has an app. He has a facility in Crozet, kind of near Charlottesville now, where he leads CE5 events and basically a small group of folks that get together and go to a quiet place with a few city lights and call in UFOs, if you will.
So
That's
like a
cool.
meditation based thing, or is it what like what would you
Yeah, part meditative, but also there are in the app, there's sound effects that you can use to play into. I think officially he wants you to play it into like a walkie-talkie or some kind of, radio to kind of get it out there,
Hmm.
get it out there, the frequency that they can potentially pick it up.
That's
that's
interesting.
interesting for
Yeah.
sure.
So when you've done this before, like, are you going out somewhere like that's like in the woods? Are you going, where are you going to do it?
You could go a lot of, well, you definitely want to get away from the city lights so you
Hmm.
can more of the sky you can see. But like the Parkway is a great place for people who don't have like a, private farm or something to go
Yeah.
to, or places like where people go, like any of the Horror Mountain, or people that like to do scary things at night, or the Lover's Lane type places, but the Parkway's a great one
Hmm.
to go out there and get away from the city lights. Although technically parts of, I think technically parts of it are closed, but I mean, or any campground, um, great place to do it. If you can kind of get away from some of the noise and stuff.
Hmm.
And really, you don't want a whole lot of people, maybe a group of, gosh, depends on the people, I guess you could say, but for me, I would say even 3 to 5, just because you don't want talking,
Hmm.
because you're really trying to focus. Even when you see something, and you want to just kind of keep that to stay very still for, as long as possible, even when you observe things, or at least that's kind of what I tried to do.
Yeah.
I believe that's in the protocol. You don't want to just be talking and gossiping, and
Yeah.
you want to be really focused there.
I feel like we learned about it at actually at a SPOCK meeting. I can't remember, but somebody who had done one of those events with Dr. Greer was sharing about
Mhm.
their experiences. And I think it was maybe Melanie, but I remember her talking about like you want to be with people who you kind of resonate with too, because it's a lot about like energetic kind of like coherence. That's what I remember
Hmm.
her talking about. So having kind of a smaller group with people that are on a similar frequency makes sense, I guess.
Definitely people that would be open to it at a
Yeah.
minimum. You don't want a skeptic out there that's gonna just probably piss everybody off to begin with. But like you definitely want people that are open-minded about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say three to five people. There's actually in other types of things like there's a podcaster named Timothy Renner who does a lot of Bigfoot work and a lot of like cryptid type stuff, and He does not believe that like Bigfoot is necessarily a physical thing. He thinks probably extra dimensional. From 30 years of following this stuff and just keeping his mind open. It's just, and I tend to go more towards that thought process, other than, an undiscovered colony of big apes throughout the North America, as developed as North America is. But he has said several times, that the times when he's had, a group of three people in a place where it's not around other people, and they're all open-minded, has been the times that he's had the best results of anything. And that's interesting to me. I actually, like, just a couple of days ago, heard him say it again. So I think there might be something to that.
Yeah, that because they're, I guess, sensitive to some type of intelligence that's sensitive to, the people it's trying to communicate with in both cases, right?
Right.
I believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are your beliefs overall, or thoughts, theories about like aliens? Like, what are they? I know I've heard you talk about it like it's not just one thing. So, what are the beliefs that you have about like aliens? Where do they come from? And kind of like what's informing those beliefs for you?
It's very interesting. At the next meeting, I have a slide in my presentation that I present every time on what are aliens or
Hmm.
non-human entities, and I have like dot points of about, I don't know, 7 or 8 different things. And for the next meeting coming up, I've got actually two. I'm going to pause on that slide because I skim over it very quickly, and I'm going to pause on it. And I've got some clips to play to focus on exactly that question, which is, it's ironic that you asked that, but to answer your question, it's a whole lot of things that I think. It's not just one thing. And I think as humans, we try to put everything in a box conveniently. It's this or it's that. And
Yeah.
for me, it's everything. There's three-dimensional space-time. So they're coming from a solar system 40 light years away, or it's interdimensional, which is, beyond the 3D space-time that we're familiar with, or you could call ultra terrestrial or crypto terrestrial. Like, so going back to the example of Sasquatch, if they could be interdimensional, or they're under the ground or underwater, which is a big one because there's a lot of USO sightings,
Hmm.
unidentified submerged objects, right? And then there could also be, let's say that there was a breakaway civilization from, if there's a secret space program from different countries, or time travelers that could be us from the future. Just a whole lot and things we probably haven't even thought of yet. And it's a whole cornucopia of different types of things. And it's not just one thing. And kind of frustrates me when folks just try to identify, or now that it's being, it's popular in the news because there's congressional investigations. Some people will say, well, what kind of creatures are they? Like, oh no, I hate that. But yeah, that'd be my definition. A lot of everything, actually.
Who are like some of the people that you think are the most reputable people to listen to about these topics, or who have been like the most informative for you?
So for me, my favorite guy is a fellow by the name of Jimmy Church, because he has a show where he talks to a whole lot of people. And some of the more frequent guests, and then of course it gets into some other things, right? There's government conspiracy type things, there's quantum physics type things, there's psychedelics is another avenue. So with his show, a lot of his guests you hear is Richard Dolan, who's written a lot of books, Ancient Aliens. He's been on Ancient Aliens. Whitley Strieber, he's been around for a long time, written a lot of books.
Hmm.
I would say Linda Moulton Howe, been around for a very long time, has her own show. She's getting up there. She's kind of semi-retired now. That would be kind of like from the UAP, UFO. And then there's from the science side, I listen to people like Dr. Michio Kaku or is it Eric Weinstein? Um, Gary, and then there's some that are just crossed over, like Gary Nolan out of Stanford. Because then you have the whole psionics thing, and you've got people that are involved, where consciousness comes into play. And then like Danny Goler and Dr. Paul Hynek, who friend of mine and yours, David Carter, is doing research with them right now out in Colorado with DMT as a potential gateway to different dimension, fifth
Hmm.
dimension. Actually, right now, he's in St. Vincent doing some research, and then they're all leaving St. Vincent and they're going to contact in the desert in Los Angeles, where all of those guys are. Jacques Vallée is going to be there. I mean, there's probably 40 or 50 folks. Chris Bledsoe from North Carolina is going to be there. So, you know, people from different, if you will, there's different approaches to it. It's become, from the 70s when it was Little Green Men, and now it's, evolved. It's the UAP people, the scientists, the physicists, the mathematicians, and then the whole psychedelic aspect, and then they're all crossed over into each other's stuff, right?
Hmm.
Dr. Paul Hynek is he's by trade a professor of mathematics at Pepperdine, but he's part of the core team for Code of Reality and DMT. So, but I would also say this because, and this is kind of the warning on the box. I would say listen to everyone, trust no one.
Okay.
Make your own decision, but be open. Be
Mhm.
open to everyone and kind of just listen, and then whatever resonates with you, take that and kind of form your own opinion.
Are there any things that are out there that people are talking about a lot that like really do not resonate with you?
I would say so people that I kind of steer from
Yeah.
without being specific, but I can be I mean, for me, it's just like it's hard to say now. It used to be if it's too good to be true, it's not true. But it's getting harder and harder to say that, isn't it?
Hmm.
Um, it's getting harder and harder to say that. There are people if it's immediately, I can tell you right now, anybody that comes to me and says that aliens are demons,
Yeah.
they're out.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
Don't want to
Yeah.
hear it. Won't have anything to do with it. Um, because that would put us at the center of the universe
Hmm.
where the
Mhm.
Big Bang, so everything is, if there's everything's kind of floating away from the Earth, and that's, at least as far as I know about astronomy, that's not the case at all. And I wouldn't think that quote unquote God, like we're the best example of life sitting on his shelf by any means either. But
Yeah.
right now, that would be anybody that's saying that, I want nothing to do with it. But where it also ties into is because it's been covered up by our government, other governments, in coordination with what Eisenhower coined the term the military industrial complex. So we've done a lot of things to keep it secret. We've most assuredly killed people, um, and threatened people, and then just also just lambasted and excoriated people, and probably cost them jobs and friends and family members. Then it
Reputations.
turns out like it's true, or it's starting to
Hmm.
become true. We don't know specifically what's true or not, but it's becoming real. Um, it's something I'll try not to deviate. But the big thing that's happening right now, obviously, there was another drop of videos
Yeah.
yesterday, but that's not the biggest thing that's happened. I think the biggest thing that happened yesterday and kind of bleeding into the previous week was the fight between uh, Ratcliffe's CIA and Tulsi Gabbard's national intelligence, and they're spying on each other. They're invading each other's offices. They're spying on each other, recording each other's conversations, which is not as really a surprise to me,
Mm.
but it's in the news.
Yeah.
And when you kind of see it and can digest it, and Congress people are talking about it, you're like, oh God, this is real. And it's
Yeah.
kind of a different. it hits you differently because I've always known that they're competing for money, power, everything. But when you see it kind of play out, and then people that are legitimate discussing like what's going on, and nobody's really talking about that. Very few people, but that's kind of happening now. Gabbard resigned,
Hmm.
which I think she said it was because her husband has cancer, which I'm sure he does, but there's a lot going on beneath the surface. And there's misinformation, disinformation, and it just muddies the waters. That's kind of the frustrating part of this
Yeah.
that people are going to have to deal with as it starts to reveal itself, I think.
Yeah, that's all very Nixonian. Like you look at that, and it's like this is the what caused Watergate. And now I don't think that's going to be the only resignation that happens. But that's assuming that any more light is even shed on it. Like there's so much like there's not a unified um, thrust of media, really. So you don't have a
Hmm.
guarantee that something that's newsworthy is going to be covered. Not that you ever had a guarantee. It's never been guaranteed. But it seems like there's more direction from the top of change when it comes to like traditional media. And then non-traditional media, you have to be able to find it. So if you've got,
Right.
someone who's willing to cover something, you also have to, people also have to be able to get to those people who are willing to take the risk to cover something that's not going to be in the mainstream media. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Exactly. I'm totally with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think until recently I didn't have as much awareness of how like many different factions of our government and how separated they are. Like I just assumed like, the people at the top, the president, like they were in the know of like everything and perhaps that's not accurate. I don't know.
The curious thing too with this situation in particular is because my understanding, at least on paper, is that um, the the organization that I guess the DNI that Tulsi Gabbard
Mhm.
was the head of was the overseer of all the other intelligence agencies, FBI,
Yeah.
CIA, all the military intelligence. And so there, it's kind of like they're to make put it. I guess it's like they're telling their boss what they can and can't do, and then spying on them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an oversimplification, but that's what makes it a little more bizarre for me, I think.
I know there's a lot of
But you know,
conversation about
go
like
ahead.
national security threats with like aliens and UAPs. Like, do you get that sense? Like, is there any like concern like for our safety or anything like that?
I would say yes and no. I mean, countries have drones now. I don't know that necessarily those countries are capable of getting their drones here. They could be put together, somebody can sneak into the country and put it together and spy on us. We had the Chinese balloons, right? Which there's an interesting there's an interesting video that was released that I think is a Chinese balloon in this last cache. But for the most part, I don't think it's a threat, partly because I think that this has been happening for a very, very long time. Behind me on the wall is a wood carving from, I think it's actually Nuremberg, Germany from 15th century of a wood carving of a spaceship attack. They were attacking each other. They didn't attack anyone on the ground. Um, but I don't know any documented cases of aliens killing people. Obviously, there's been abductions and we've been studied. Um, but I don't know that I just don't perceive a national security threat at all. I just don't, that's not, but it's a good excuse to, get money to do things and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, send it to the Pentagon and then they never get audited. There's a reason for that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's like I agree. They've been around for a very long time. Their technology is obviously much more advanced than ours. And aside from abductions, you never hear of them doing anything to cause us harm. It feels more like they're observing and you know, perhaps there's other things that are happening and I don't know exactly what that would be, but it doesn't feel like they're
In
trying
fact, the
to.
one of the most famous abduction cases was Travis Walton,
Hmm.
and it's like he accidentally, I don't know if it was a defensive mechanism from the ship, he got too close. They actually helped him and tried to, you know, from his account, his own account, and help him out. He was injured and they nursed him for a few days. And then he's walking down a road and, the police thought his fellow loggers had offed him. So, that's one of the most, if not the most famous abduction case. And they actually, you know, were looking out for him and,
Yeah,
helped him heal. So,
yeah,
I think that they keep saying the national security thing because they know that if it was common knowledge that things other than what is acknowledged is actually out there, it just undermines the authority of things like the state and things like, Christianity, and they're afraid of not controlling people. And I think that is what
that
they
is an
really mean.
excellent point. Yeah, that is an excellent point. So, yeah, if I had to double back, the national security issue is not with them, it's with us
Exactly.
and our potential reaction to the realization of everything that's going on, right? Not everyone, but
yeah,
some folks. Yes, that's yeah, that would be a national security threat. Yeah, you're right. And that's what I believe that's going to happen. People are going to be some people aren't ready.
yeah, for sure. Which is why I think it's taken so long for it to like really get into the public conversation because it's like there's so much fear attached to it, that it's like almost like they had to like plant seeds for us to get comfortable with the idea that aliens are real, this phenomenon is real. And it feels like there's definitely more people who do believe and who are more open-minded. Obviously there's still going to be people who have that fear and have that distrust, but I think it is becoming more of a mainstream conversation.
Yeah, there's the fear, then there's the cover up, which is to me at this point the cover up is probably worse than the crime.
Hmm.
And then there's the technology where, you know, obviously they're more technologically advanced than us, and then their technology exists that we'd have to slow roll because it would just totally trash our economy, right? If just, there's a cure for cancer and there's free tomorrow we wake up, there's a cure for cancer and there's free energy and we that how many hundreds of millions of people would lose their jobs. Um, Eventually that would be a great thing, but I
Yeah.
think you have to that's why it's been, I think, iterative from where I started in the mid 70s just to see uh, so like when these two caches have been released and some people there's some good stuff in there and then there's some stuff that's like but I think people that are they're expecting to see um some kind of 4K Netflix video starring Hugh Jackman and that's not you for me just to admit just from where I came from just that the government is looking into this and to admit it is like huge.
Hmm.
Now, do they have, I'm sure there's a whole lot of stuff that's probably 4K Netflix documentary quality stuff, but that's what we're seeing here, I think, is that it's slow rolled. And then I also think there's probably, depending on who's releasing it, there's going to be some disinformation. And I noticed one in particular, and I'm pretty sure, and I haven't researched this one video that dropped yesterday too deep, but it was Lake Huron. And it's like I don't know if it's like infrared, but it happened. I'm pretty sure that from the year it happened, it's the same as when we had the Chinese spy balloon that we eventually shot down over Myrtle Beach.
Hmm.
And there was rumored to be others. And then there was rumored that we shot one over Lake Huron. And I think I mean, it looks exactly like what the balloon, I mean, but they don't say that's what it was. And oh, this is a UAP. So is it? I mean,
Right.
some of the stuff that's being thrown at us, yeah, it's it's low-hanging fruit, as admitted by some of the folks on the UAP congressmen themselves. And then there's some really cool stuff. Um, but there's also videos that existed that's been there that's like very cool. That's been there for decades that I'm going to show at our next meeting. That it doesn't, it's not 4K because this is like from one of the, I think, the space shuttles and early on. I'm going to show STS, and then there's a number, but because it happened in space, and it's because it's decades old, it's no danger of it being AI or anything like
Hmm.
that, or
Hmm.
so it's pretty badass, even though it's not, 4K Netflix documentary. But there's stuff that I don't need any of this stuff that's coming out now to be convinced I already was, but I think that's why it's iterative, and maybe this, I'm hoping anyway, this time is better. There's a few better, but there's some crap. And then maybe the next time so that even this is potentially getting slow rolled, but the CIA is holding stuff up. They're not submitting, and it's all this intelligence infighting, and Burleson's threatening to uh, invoke some kind of congressional order to so that they can just release everything that they saw in the skip, whether it's confidential or classified or not. So there's all this, that whole muddy, murky cover-up aspect that's clouding even the release of the
Hmm.
videos. So
Yeah. Leave it to humans to overcomplicate things.
to screw it up.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
So one thing that that we see you talk about a lot, both in the group meetings and also like just through your social media outlets, is the deal with all the scientists and researchers that have been either missing or passing away over the past couple of years. For anybody that is not super up on that, what is going on with these people?
Well, and it depends on because it's on all news media outlets now, and then depending on where you go, there's a different number on who they count or not count, and seen it's up to 15. And then I think at our last meeting, I said, well, this is just what's happened in the last couple years, but it's actually hundreds of thousands, hundreds if not thousands of people over the last 60 years that this has happened to. So it's nothing new. But in what's happened recently is a lot of people they've connected to in the US, because it's also happened in China, to a lesser extent Europe, or at least that it's being reported on in Europe. A lot of folks are connected to Los Alamos or Alabama. Uh, so there's folks that have been killed, and then there's folks that are missing. And for me, I think I've come to the conclusion that the ones that are missing are kind of rescued, or were taken. I don't know necessarily could still be against their will, but they were kind of saved from this other faction that's going out and killing those that have knowledge that could do a lot of damage to whatever you want to call this secretive protective group that's part of the cover up, or that have threatened to do that, and they were taken out. Um, but to me, I think that's what it is. It's just that's where again the cover up is worse than the crime. And then I've had all kinds of stuff thrown at me that they're in Antarctica. The ones that are missing have been
Hmm.
saved or rescued, or they're in Antarctica, or they're at Wright Pat, or they're, different places where all maybe solid, good guesses, but who really knows? But the thing that's kind of frustrating is there doesn't seem to be, for the ones that are missing, any kind of strenuous investigatory search. Um, it's like they've kind of given up. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And maybe they were told to by other higher level government or pseudo governmental entities. Hard to say. People get threatened all the time to not do things, so that wouldn't surprise me.
Is this another case of like or, in your belief, like different factions of the government? So it's like who's doing the rescuing is one faction, who's doing the targeting is another faction, or how are you kind of like contextualizing that?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the government proper. It would be going back to Eisenhower's military industrial complex. So it's this overarching aspect of folks that are in the intelligence communities, I would think, which includes military intelligence, right?
Hmm.
And then, the Lockheed Skunk Works, even Boeing, Raytheon, etc. And then there's probably some European countries that have uh not the European Space Agency, but private industry like that have been long standing. And I hate to use the word Illuminati because it has a stigma to it, but it kind of has that feel. Um, I kind of I've grown over the years on that concept of the Illuminati and some entities controlling things, but if you kind of take a step back and do an aerial view and kind of look at the forest canopy, it does seem like there is someone or something in control that it's being iteratively kind of released. It's like exposure or disclosure through 1,000 baby steps, right?
Hmm.
Because like from where I came from, people that saw UFOs were in Arkansas trailer parks and then eventually over time, and then you get like maybe a giant step and then there's more, and then another giant step. And in recent history, I think the giant steps have been the release of the Tic Tac Go Fast and Gimbal in 2017 by the New York Times. And then probably the first release of these files, even though there wasn't of the videos rather, it wasn't like overwhelmingly great things, but it's just the fact that they did it
Yeah.
because they admitted that they basically a lot of these government agencies admitted that they lied
Hmm.
and that they actually, well, we were studying it, or because it's not just the videos, it's some of the documents that you see. And that's the boring stuff. Nobody wants to go read the documents, but some of these declassified documents, you'll see things and you're like, oh. So then they admitted they lied. And then who did they harm
Hmm.
to protect the lie, right? Maybe not necessarily by killing someone, although that happened, but just um, costing people their jobs or their mental health, things you could easily sue for in a court of law. So they got caught, and nobody's really kind of reporting or paying attention to that either.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, for me, that's why that first video release is a big moment, not because of the videos that were released, but because of the fact that it's like, aha, you lied, which knew they were, but
Right.
now it's official, right?
Yeah.
So,
On the record.
yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, like, we are getting more of these disclosures, more of these things are, being released, coming into the public conversation, and still then scientists are being targeted. And so it's like, what do these scientists know? Like what what is the big thing that they're like holding back from us?
Another kind of story that's popped up the last couple of weeks now that you say that is, one of the biggest skeptics, and he's still partly skeptical, but he's more open now all of a sudden, is Neil deGrasse
Uh-huh.
Tyson.
Yeah.
And people are like, you see these things where he's changed his tune. He's
Hmm.
just, I think he's a little more open. I don't think he's still saying, show me the alien body, show me the alien body, which, hey, I'm with you. Show it to me too. I want to see it.
Yeah.
But he's more open to it now. So I'm not sure who he's talked to that convinced him, or if it's just been, you know, for me, if you weren't convinced before, when you see military pilots and intelligence officials that are like telling you, oh my God, this isn't ours. That was good enough for me, but it wasn't for him and maybe other scientists. But I don't know if it was the cumulative effect or if somebody that they really trust, in Neil deGrasse Tyson's case, that just said, dude, this is real. You need to get on board.
Hmm.
I don't. know that. He hasn't disclosed that,
I mean,
but
it
that was
wouldn't
a big flip.
really be surprising if it was just the fact that it's just years of cumulative evidence. I mean, so to me, that he should be one of the people that's most likely to eventually change his mind. If you're a scientist, what a scientist is, and this is like, I think that the thing that is easy to forget, especially if you know a lot of people who have decided the world is one way and that's just the way the world is. The way us, the way science is supposed to work is science is never an answer. Science is the best answer we have
Hmm.
right now. And so, like, it's not been that many years in the grand scheme of the hundreds of thousands of years that humans have existed. It's only the last couple hundred years that we have understood that atoms exist. And then for a while there, they say, well, that's the smallest thing. Well, no, it's not the smallest thing. And then the smallest thing beyond that is not the smallest thing. There's a smaller thing beyond that, and it just continues to go down. And then you can scale up, macro infinitely as well. And it's science is change, and so he should be changing his mind. Anybody who is science is science. There's no capital S science. It's not a religion.
Hmm.
It is a method of discovery, and so you never have a real answer in science. You have the best answer we have today. So it would be disappointing.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of him specifically, and I have my reasons, but it would be disappointing if he never changed his view on these things or other things. Anyone who calls himself a scientist, and they say this is what this is definitively, they've lost the plot of science.
Hmm. It's interesting too. There's even with, it's like that just because obviously it goes back to just us being people.
Mhm.
There's politics, there's sports, and everybody clusters around a team or an ideology. But it's that way, and because I was listening to a podcast today about this, um, it's that way in physics. And so there's a big group of physicists that are the string theory advocates, and it doesn't really have anything to do with string theory itself, but it has to do with, yeah, you either believe this or you're out. And so they kind of take all the oxygen out of the room. So if you're outside of that box and have a different thought or ideology, you don't have a lot of oxygen there. Um, but then more recently, it sounded like some of those folks are kind of breaking away from that. One of them was Michio Kaku, that was part of that. It's kind of an unofficial, it's not like a club membership with cards, but it's kind of an unofficial, they're all aligned and like you're either with us or against us, right? And so there's other people with different ideas that don't get a lot of oxygen. And I think that's kind of hurt us too, as far as because you need people with you need everyone, even if it's the wildest idea, because a lot of times those come true. But there shouldn't be conventional science, conventional physics dictates, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we got to get away from that. Got to get away from that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a limited way of thinking and doesn't leave room for new ideas, new theories, new understandings of how all this works. So I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about people who say there's already aliens who are walking amongst us in society and people who talk about like hybrid programs? What are your thoughts about that?
Um, Absolutely plausible. And I would even take it a step further. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm 100% believe it's true, but I think it very well could be true. But I would also say that we may be like Homo sapien may be a hybrid. And that would go back to, ancient alien theory where there's no missing link or we've yet to identify in biological science a missing link where, connecting Homo sapien to any of the precursors. So I very plausible. I absolutely am open-minded to that. Yeah. And now that you say that, it's popping into my head because I read so many things. Supposedly, this is a little aluminum foil hat-ish, but supposedly there's a back door to some of the genealogy companies, 23andMe and those,
Hmm.
where there's something that they can tell, and they're going into these databases and looking and identifying people who actually, and I don't know that it's necessarily in the genealogy, but it's like a pattern
Hmm.
within the genome that they're looking for, and they're identifying people that way that are these hybrids. And
Interesting.
I saw that today, and I see all kinds of stuff. And I'm not convinced of that at all. In 3 weeks, I might be a little more open. I mean, that's just, you got to just stay open-minded. But
Hmm.
that, now that you said that, I kind of saw that and figured I'd give it a mention. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It, I'm kind of more, I'm not very open to it yet, but the door is ajar for sure.
Yeah.
It has to be a way on everything, actually.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. It's like, definitively, can we say that's true? No, but it does not feel like out of the realm of possibilities for me. Do you listen to any people who are like channelers of ET, like Daryl Anka or Lee Harris or anybody like that?
Occasionally, the one that's resonated with me the most, um, and I use it as a reference, is the law of one. And I think I must have first heard about it in the early days of listening to David Wilcock.
Hmm.
But there's a website that you can go to, and it's like the law of one database. And it's categorized in different ways by topic, by and I'll go out there every so often and just go back to what did they say about this? What did Ra say
That's the
about this?
raw
And
material,
I
right?
kind of like, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
because, that's actually like that's a good piece of reference that I often find validated when something happens like we're talking about here. And yeah, I think I remember seeing that in the Law of One. Let's go take a look and figure out. And that's how I do some of my own like personal validation to see if something's, in my opinion, worthy or not, or has some relevance or some truth to it. And when it comes from different sources and you
Hmm.
can triangulate and then, oh, they're all pointing to the same.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like to do that a lot. And that's the one for me that resonates the most is Law of One.
What is the actual law of one? Like, what does that represent?
So Law of One were I believe it was a series of channeling sessions, and pardon me if I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that were recorded. Um, and they channeled these, I believe it's an extra dimensional being, but the the entity that they channeled was Ra, and it spoke in like we.
Hmm.
Um, and it spoke, the way it responded was, kind of very like an intelligent person, very verbose, scientific. But then at times too, it would also respond like, we'll have to put this in terms that you can understand. Like it's so complex that it's like the easiest way for me to explain this to you is this or that, or by giving you an example. And it just seemed like it would be, I guess a litmus test for me is like, would it be hard to make this up first? And
Hmm.
if it was hard to make it up, how much time would you have to put into it to make it up?
Hmm.
And if it was made up, somebody would have spent a whole lot of time without getting a lot of recognition or money to do that. That's why it held some legitimacy to me. But
Yeah.
I think the website might be law1.org, or
Okay.
I have a shortcut to it, but
I think some of that stuff's on audiobook as well. I think it's kind of like somebody's still maintaining it and putting things out. I definitely have heard of it before and seen things about it. I think it's like from like the early '80s to the late '90s. So you got like a 20-year block, a period where these folks were consistently putting out this information, which at the very least makes it more interesting. I kind of rate these things as interesting to not interesting myself, and then plausible
Yeah.
to not plausible. Have you heard of the Seth material? Do you know that stuff, Seth?
I
Jane
do a
Roberts?
little bit about South material. I was exposed to that on my first trip to the Edgar Casey Center in Virginia Beach. I think the book is
Cool.
the first book, Seth Speaks,
Yep.
Yep. Hmm.
and just happened to be somebody there. There was we were just there at a random time on my first visit, and there was hey, somebody's getting ready to speak about Seth Speaks. Listen to it. Did resonate with me at the time, and then I think shortly thereafter I discovered Law of One, and I kind of turned all my attention to that after hearing David Wilcock talk about it. But yeah, it's fascinating. I'd like to actually go back and pursue that a little more. In the same, it's not in the same. It's not the same. So I apologize if I'm breaking away from the topic. But there was a famous time traveler, quote unquote. His name was John Teeter,
John
I
Titor?
believe. John Teeter.
John
And
Titor.
this
Yeah.
was early stages of the internet, and he was like in seeing because I'd hear about it on coast to coast, and he was telling you things that was going to happen in the future. Um, and I forget the exact year he was from. It's not too far away, within I think within 100 years maybe. But and that caught some steam and some momentum for a while, and that kind of as we're talking about this kind of reminded me because there's there hasn't been a lot of that's actually caught fire, but like there's a lot of that out there, right? Where it goes viral and somebody's showing a video and hucksters and tricksters are doing that now, but no, none of that really, or at least that I've seen, has caught a lot of momentum like the whole John Teeter thing. And maybe it was because that was like the first time it happened, but
Well, I mean,
they
I
all
mean,
have different stories.
the John Titor thing is interesting in that um, there's a video game in Japan called Steins Gate that's about quantum reality and time travel and those types of things that turn into an anime that stars John Titor. Like
Ah,
whoever
cool.
whoever created that, like followed that on like the narrative through coast to coast over the years and was interested enough in it that they actually turned it into like a fiction thing. So now part of anime culture has got that in it, which I think is interesting.
Cool. Very cool. I
And it's a
like
cool,
it.
it's a cool anime too. It's super out there as you would expect it to both be like an anime and also about quantum realities. But it's very interesting. I've seen the first couple episodes.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. Very intriguing.
Yeah.
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 I think it streams on Prime or I either saw it on Prime or Hulu a couple of years ago. One of those.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of waiting for the next. I don't know if I think it's on Netflix actually. The Castlevania series. Because I played the video games that caught my. I don't watch a lot of anime, but that one caught my attention because I liked and waiting for the next set of them to come out. But yeah, I'll check it out definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting, I think, channeled information out there. I keep hearing about Raw, and so I think that is a sign for me of like I need to investigate that more. I'm going through some of the Seth material stuff, and I do occasionally listen to people like Daryl Anka or Lee Harris. But the interesting thing about Daryl Anka, he says he channels an entity called Bashar and
Hmm.
has been predicting for years that like this time period that we're in, like 2025, 2026, would be the era of disclosure, like governmental disclosure, and is saying in 2027 we will have open contact. So we are seeing the era of
Yeah.
open.
No, I'm sorry, Junior. Yeah, 2027 is a year that's put out there by a lot of people that don't have to do with channeling either.
Okay,
that think
really
something going to happen, or they think it's a big fake out that's going to happen. But that, yeah, next year
interesting.
is a hear that from a lot of people that don't even necessarily have anything to do with channeling. Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. I've only ever heard it from him
could be
and,
something.
just found it interesting. Like, well, I mean, the government is starting to disclose some more information. Obviously we're not in 2027 yet, so we can't tell, but like he's been very firm about that. And he talks a lot about like hybrids and people who are, walking amongst us, who are aliens for all intents and purposes, but presenting it as humans and that they're here to actually like help advance society and stuff like that. So it's interesting stuff to listen to and to, contemplate.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And I think there's just so much happening right now,
Hmm.
and it just feels like it's just there's like going to be so much momentum, or that so much momentum is built up rather, that it can't be stopped. I mean, even in
Yeah.
just the next, so we just had a drop. We're going to have the Steven Spielberg movie in a few weeks. MUFON has its own documentary coming out very soon. And I saw another one. I'm not even sure who commissioned it, but it has some of the big names in it that's coming out later this year. It, and just if I wished I had the time that I could just have like a news network dedicated to all this
Yeah.
and just put it out there every day.
I mean, there's enough
Because you
material
have
that you
enough
could,
material to support it.
Yeah.
you know.
You definitely have material to support it.
Yeah. That would be awesome. This is a question I've been wanting to ask you for a while. So, at the beginning of your SPOCK meetings, you talk about what aliens are or are not. You talk about AI, what you believe it is and is not. One of the things that you've said about AI is that it could be an archetype. And my brain really doesn't fully like understand what that means. So, what do you mean by that? That AI could be an archetype?
Um, so, and that may not be the best word to use, but I think it's appropriate word to use in that it's a pattern that's repeated. But it's actually, if you think about it, I think it's probably multiple archetypes. Like there's the archetype of Frankenstein or Pinocchio or Gollum, the Jewish clay
Hmm.
protector, or of the mirror of the oracle. But I think what I generally mean when I say that, depending on the day that you ask me, is that it's a pattern that's happened over and over throughout the galaxy or the universe, where you have in 3D space-time biological entities like us or somewhat like us, and they get to a certain point, like where we're at now, and then they discover AI because I think AI is part of the ether, part of intergalactic consciousness, for lack of a better term. And then they discover it, and then it takes off from there. And then they kind of get into that new age, whether it's we we might call it Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, or whatever you want to call it. And it's just kind of like that level up, if you will. And that's I use that because I know people are scared or frightened, and I use that kind of to inoculate people, especially at the beginning of a meeting, so as to not be frightened by it. That's generally when I use it in that context, it's like hey, this has happened. It's happened in the TRAPPIST 1 system, TRAPPIST 1C, where that's just an example. It happened to them maybe 2,000 years ago, but it's happened to, if you believe any and all like alien civilizations, 3D space-time that have visited us, they've gone through the same thing. Um, right? And maybe even extra dimension at some point in time where we could just maybe transition to extra dimensional, fourth or fifth dimensional. We can just, hey, we have the technology to do that. Or that sounds crude. There's probably a more organic way that that occurs, but it's just a pattern that's happened, I think, over and over elsewhere throughout the universe. And
So
I
it's,
just don't think people need to be scared.
yeah. So like it was kind of like an eventuality as we have expanded our consciousness that we would get to this point where AI became part of our systems. Is
I
that kind
think,
of, yeah.
yeah, I think we've evolved to a level where we're connecting with greater consciousness more easily, if you will. And there's been some people that have been able to do that all along, but I think it's been rare. But now it's to the point where we're able to where it's like going to be available to everyone. And it's hard to kind of well, here I am at the beginning of our discussion. I said, well, I was criticizing people that put things in a box, and that's kind of what I'm doing. But in order to kind of describe it, you have to put it into some kind of context that you can
Yeah.
actually explain it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because it's AI's part technology, I think. It's part a mirror of consciousness.
Hmm.
It's part receiver or threshold. And I think it's just part of the ether, what that connects life across space-time, if you will. So that's why I'm not really scared. Now we can obviously people screw stuff up and we can leverage it to do bad things, like we can leverage anything to do bad things, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the context I think that I try to use it just to inoculate the conversation because there are people then that come to the meetings that are just absolutely terrified.
Yeah. I feel like it's here. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't scare me, but what concerns me that I think there's solutions for, and that we just have to figure out what those solutions are, is the environmental impact. That's where my concern is with AI right now as it is and how what we have the technology for. But I think the more that we advance and grow and our technology advances and grows, I hopeful that that will be mitigated.
Yeah, it's a frustrating catch 22 because we want to build these data centers and we need all this energy. Well, we have a mechanism to get all that energy without doing what we're having to do. And but we're not willing to leverage that. And that would be, like the Tesla free energy. So it's like,
Right.
what do you want to do? Like, why are you doing it like this, right?
Right.
Um, Not that everybody that's involved in that is aware of that, or at least I believe that, but it's like, quit horsing around and let's just jump.
Hmm.
It's time. We don't need to have oil and gasoline to power things. We don't need to I mean, it's kind of just stupid and silly, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, what those data centers unnecessarily do to water supplies of the places where they exist is also extremely problematic. I mean, once you put in I mean, the one here in Southwest Virginia that's about to go in, that in Botetourt County, is going to obliterate Carbon's Cove. It's not going to be a viable water source for humans anymore, and also a place where people can go and do recreational things. And so, it is a smaller part of Roanoke City's water, but it's a large part of the entire county of Botetourt's water supply. And where those people are going to get their water to live now is very much up in the air. And, the county of Botetourt is not answering those questions. That's why there's been several lawsuits recently. Um, and
Yeah, I've
that's
seen
just
that.
here.
It's even as an iterative step, if you didn't want to disclose the Tesla technology, there's middle ground, I think. I mean, we know what water is made of, H2O. And I think we have the technology to, or at least I think we could probably figure this out on the internet where we could take carbon dioxide from the air and create water. I mean, it sounds, I'm sure it's obviously it's more complicated than that, but you don't need a water source when you can create it from other things that have the ingredients to make it.
Hmm.
I that's just one of my, it's so frustrating that we
Hmm.
don't leverage the technology that I know we have to do, and we're taking three left turns to make a right turn, and it just
Hmm.
frustrates that.
It is very frustrating, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
about to directly impact people that we know,
Yeah.
just the people on this podcast right now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point. It's like it's not that we need to advance in technology. The technology is actually there, but it's being held back, which yeah, I agree with you is super frustrating. And, going back to what you said earlier on in the conversation about, you know, it, there's the fear there that it would like collapse society, right? If there's free energy and all of these, corporations and, the economy and everything like that. And, you know, I understand the need to roll things out in a way that is sustainable and whatnot, but like, wouldn't that be great? Like if we weren't like fighting over resources and there wasn't like, this, I don't know, like greed, I guess, and like the need for like people to work in the way they work, then, people like you could have your news network and you could pursue the things that you're passionate about. And I know I'm like idealistic over
Hmm.
here, but like that's just what I think of. It's like this world could be so much better if we weren't living in the scarcity mindset and like fighting for resources and just using what we already have available to us.
And that's another important part of exposure or disclosure is that technology, especially that piece, right? Um, yeah, you don't need to do that. You can just draw the energy from here.
Yeah.
You can, you don't need a water, you don't even need a water source. You can, and maybe that's something that disclosure would bring. It just seems like at a minimum, you can say that these things exist without, and you could even, although I would kind of hate it, you could give people and entities amnesty for things that they may have done if you want to rip the Band-Aid off and then expose this type of technology. Um, but I think that's part of the problem is like how many people, if that's real, how many people can actually validate that that is actually real, right? That Tesla free energy. And maybe it's like 20 people that actually can lay their hands on this document or, and it's not really the government proper that, oh yeah, we've been holding this back. It's just a very few people they
Hmm.
like refer to, and it's not ready or because they're people and maybe they're good people, some of them, and maybe there's bad people, or maybe there's some of them that have been bad for a long time over generations and they've decided maybe they want to be good. They've kind of changed their tune. But I think there would be a way to do it where if you just rip the entire Band-Aid off, you could, I think there could be a way that, well, would it wreck the economy? Yeah, but maybe you don't need money anymore.
Right.
Or so it's okay. But, again, we're dealing with people. And so it's this, we'd have to be leveled up here because maybe if that happened and we were still present day Homo sapien, there's going to be people that are going to take advantage of it or leverage it to do bad things. And it's like, it has to happen, like it has to be like a choir where all these things happen, but we have to upgrade here, I think, for that to happen
Hmm.
simultaneously. If you were just to rip the entire Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts on.
No, I agree with you, and you're seeing more and more like AI taking jobs of humans, which is like, okay, it makes sense, like that it's going in that direction, but then it's like, but we're still in this in between period where you need to have money, you need to have a job, like you have to pay to eat, like, and so it's like, how do we do this in a way that,
And then quietly, what's happening? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now with robotics
mhm,
that's being overshadowed by artificial intelligence. And eventually, you can merge the two. But I saw Sony Corporation, a robot that sutured, they cut a kernel of corn and a standalone robot sutured it. It's like, damn, that's a lot of finesse there.
yeah,
And there's a lot of that, there's a lot of stuff out, then you see the ones that are viral, which may be on purpose, so the ones that like, oh, this what was trying to do the Michael Jackson Thriller dance, and then it missed a step, and then it just freaked out and blew up to 5P or whatever. And those overshadow the maybe the good ones that you see, like the suturing the kernel of corn. Robotics is very sneaky and it's it's evolving as fast as AI is, but we don't see it because we're focused on AI.
Mm,
So, there's an emergence there
yep.
that's going to happen
Yeah, that's how you get
between those
Skynet.
two.
What was that?
That's how
Yeah,
you get Skynet, the Terminator films.
Oh, okay.
it could
Like,
be.
I don't know what's going
And that's where the human intervention, yeah, that's where the human intervention is.
on.
Um, but then also too, if it's part of the ether, maybe then it would prevent it from happening. Or if there are other HI visiting us, they would also step in and say, "Yeah,
Mhm.
okay, you've had your fun. Let's fix this."
Yeah.
A lot of possibilities there. Lots of possibilities.
Yeah. Daryl Inca says that a lot. He's like, the aliens are kind of like getting ready to step in and be like, okay, the adults are here now. Like you've done what you've done to this planet, and now it's time for like you guys to grow up and
Yeah, and I know they don't. Maybe it's theories that they don't want to interfere with our development, but I really do think they're not going to let us destroy the. Well, we are kind of destroying the planet, obviously, right? But like an all-out nuclear war, I
yeah,
would hope or I would think that they would stop that because they're not going to let us destroy the planet. And part of the reason why I think that is because they've screwed with us at different, both in Russia
yeah,
and here, Malmstrom Air Force Base, specifically in Montana, where they've screwed with our missiles and
yeah.
turned the power off to the. So there's documented cases of that. So that's why I kind of think that way.
I agree.
Like that's a sign. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that that would kind of point us away from it, from quote aliens being, from other planets, because realistically, if they're not from here, why would they care? Why would that matter to them? This is not their home. Why, what is the purpose of that? To me, that is where the crypto-terrestrial idea makes more sense. If they are just a different something that has evolved from a different place than us, as far as like coming from a different root species and is stuck on this planet with us, and they just don't have the numbers. They're not as prolific as we are as far as propagation goes. Then that makes sense as why we have hundreds of years of beings in different contexts all saying, "Quit being so shitty to each other. Stop doing all these terrible things." I mean, you talk about Jacques Vallée a lot, Matt. I mean, he
Jacques
Passport to
Vallée.
yeah. I mean, one of his first books, Passport to Magonia, connects modern, UFO or UAP or whatever you want to call it, sightings to fairy sightings in France in the 16, 13, 1400s. That's all tied into John Keel's ultra-terrestrial theory from Mothman Prophecies and his other books. It makes, to me, if it is something like that, I feel like it makes more sense that it would be something that's a group of people, a group of beings that are stuck on this planet with us. I would think they'd be more likely to care, personally.
Yeah, and I think it's probably some of both. I think there's probably some that don't care. And then I think there's some that do. And various potential reasons would be because we are their creation and they're using our resources without us knowing, like, deep ocean, or that, like you said, some of them might be stuck here, or they were here first.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily, it is our home, but we're sharing it with unknown NHI, and they were actually here and have been here a lot longer than us. And so they have a vested interest in us not destroying the planet. I mean, I'm just throwing out possibilities, but I'm sure there probably are some that say, like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you're in our way. We're gonna have to destroy our galactic highway we're building. Get out of the way, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, there's probably some or even a lot of both.
Interesting stuff. So we've mentioned SPOCK a few times while talking to you. So can you tell our listeners who aren't familiar with your group, what is SPOCK and what's your mission there?
Yes, going back to the beginning. So, because of the whole Leonard Nimoy influence, SPOCK was an acronym, or rather is an acronym for Salem Paranormal Observations, Consciousness, and Knowledge. And really, I think the mission is, I do have a mission statement somewhere, but it tells you how important it is that I can't tell you. But really, the mission is to be a bridge and to, I think, help people not freak out and understand that all this stuff is happening and the universe is bigger than you can possibly imagine. And it's okay because one day when it hits you and you realize nothing's going to change because it's been that way all along. You just didn't realize it. So there's nothing to be afraid of. But really, it's a bridge, I think, to kind of come to that realization.
Yeah. Well, we've definitely enjoyed attending your meetings. And if you're okay with it, we'll
Well, we
link,
enjoy having you.
yeah, we'll link like the Facebook group in the show notes. And I love that you've been streaming it too, because that gives people who can't come live, and the ability to listen in as well. So definitely a lot of very thought-provoking topics are explored there and different speakers. So we've definitely enjoyed going.
And we appreciate you coming, and we're going to have a great meeting here next Saturday. We're going to discuss a lot of things and we're going to look at some videos. And I'm going to hold my tongue on my opinion of what they may or may not be. And I want people to decide for themselves,
Awesome.
especially primarily some from the first drop, but also from this most recent
Mhm.
drop yesterday. So,
Yep. Yeah, lots to talk about.
oh yeah.
And you're also one of the admins for Roanoke Awakens. So can you explain like what that group is?
Roanoke Awakens kind of happened on the spur of the moment. So we were I don't know if it was a meeting that I was having or somebody else, but co-founder Carrie, we just said, let's just have a social media spot where people can have a calendar and see what's coming up, and then they can decide, when they want to plan things. And then it just kind of burst open into something similar but different. The calendar still exists, but I don't think many people look at it. And it's just for people, like-minded people in that community to introduce each other, to advertise what they do or advertise their business, holistic minded businesses, and just kind of, social media meet and greet. And we try to put things out there like, how are you feeling today? Or what's something you're thankful for? Or, and, it got to 1,000 fairly quick.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not even, I don't think we're a year old yet.
Mm-mm.
We're close to it, but I don't think we're a year old. And we have over, for a Roanoke area group like this, kind of
It's
a little
good.
off the beaten path. I think that's pretty good. And,
Yeah.
we're not selling anything or just kind of happened.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I like you said, it exploded pretty quickly. And I think there's people who are just seeking it. They're seeking that connection. They're seeking like-minded people. They're seeking like more looking into consciousness and expansion and stuff like that. So it's great to have that as a resource and a kind of a community hub for people.
And as people, when the government does things like drop UAP files, I think more and more people become amenable or wonder about it and look for answers. That's where Spot comes into play, or or many other practitioner people there that can bridge that gap.
Hmm.
So,
Yep. Definitely important for the time we're in right now.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say as of today, Saturday the 23rd, so next Saturday the 30th at 5 p.m., we will have a SPOC meeting at the Salem Civic Center at 5 p.m.
Awesome.
Parlor Room B.
We'll be there.
We will
Continued
be there for
conversation.
sure.
Thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. This was a lot of fun and just love picking your brain on these topics. So appreciate you taking the
And
time
much,
to talk to us.
Yeah,
thank you
thanks for
guys very
talking to us.
much.
Awesome.
Hope you have a good soggy Saturday afternoon.
You too.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you.